Yes, we are back after a 70-20 loss by the Denver Broncos on Sunday. We're going to do a stock up, stock down. What does the stock report tell us? And where do the Broncos go from here? We're going to take a look at the offense, defense, and much more. And did Sean Payton's comments come back to bite him in the tail? You get all that on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
As the Denver Broncos prepare for week 4 of the NFL season, our stock report has released. We're going to take a look at stock up, stock down on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. You can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, more. When they're good, when they're bad, when they're in between, we have you covered every single day, every step of the way. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com here. And Sayre, really not much more we can say about really what was the disaster of week 3. The Broncos now moving on to week 4. You got to look at the tape. You got to burn it. You got to light some sage. You got to burn the sage somewhere around this whole entire situation that's going on in Denver here. We got to take a look at stock up, stock down. And obviously, while the outcome for Denver on Sunday was just massively embarrassing, disappointing, I don't even know if there's a word for it. There are some players who were bright spots and that their stock is going up a little bit. And obviously, we'll dive into where the stock down part is here on today's episode of the show here, man. So you want to kick things off here for our stock up?
Let's kick it off, Cody, but I wouldn't necessarily kick it off to Marvin Mims, the first guy on our stock up list, because, man, he could take it back to the house, right? Marvin Mims has been absolutely awesome these last couple weeks for the Denver Broncos. Obviously had the 99-yard kickoff return touchdown against the Miami Dolphins. Also had another moonball reception from Russell Wilson, as we saw a couple of times from him against the Washington Commanders the week before. So after kind of a non-existent first game against the Raiders from Marvin Mims, now we're starting to see the Broncos getting him involved with the deep ball. They've gotten him involved, handing him the ball off. They've got him involved as a kickoff and punt returner. And really, to see a kickoff return touchdown, I should have looked this up before the show, Cody. I can't remember the last time the Broncos had one of those, because really in today's NFL, it's kind of set up to prevent guys from even returning kickoffs. They're giving such an advantage for calling the fair catch or letting it go through the end zone that most teams are like, hey, only under the rarest of circumstances do you actually want to take it out. And that would mean you have an elite returner, or that you have, like the Broncos, a huge hole to dig yourself out of. So Marvin Mims, he has been a tremendous bright spot. And I think bordering on, Cody, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, bordering on somebody that, as we talked in the post-game episode, somebody the Broncos maybe could really build around.
No, I think he is a guy that has all the tools, right? You see the explosiveness, you see just the vision, like on his kick return as well. It was probably like the only exciting play outside of Cortland Sutton's early touchdown that we saw when the game was a little bit competitive, when Denver was still in it in that game there from the early onset in that first quarter. But just like his vision there, he saw where the coverage was going. He put his foot in the ground or in the grass. I don't know if it's turf or grass there at Miami, but then he outran everybody. Like, his speed is legit here. And I think that's something that Denver has been looking for, a guy like that for quite some time. They have him. That's great to see there. He's obviously very explosive, but still even playing limited snaps here, sir. I think he only had 15 total snaps in this game, and his production has been the way that it is, kind of similar in the last couple of weeks. He's a guy that I think you have to find a way to get on the field even more. He's too special of a player. Like, you look at where Tyreek Hill is, and I'm not trying to compare the two, but you look at the type of speed and dynamic that Tyreek Hill has. He's on the field the entire time. Marvin Mims simply isn't on the field as much as some of the speedier guys here in the NFL. So that's going to have to change, I think, going forward here for the Broncos. And look, not the greatest game from Brandon Johnson, unfortunately. I think it was tough. I didn't agree necessarily. I felt like he has as much right to run his route. I don't think it was like an intentional pick just to free up Cortland. I felt like that one was a little ticky-tacky. I actually thought he was set on that second penalty that got called on him. That was also a touchdown for the Broncos. So 2 touchdowns called back there. But Marvin, in my opinion, is too special of a player to not get as much playing time. So I think you got to see him going a little bit more here for the Broncos. I'm very curious to see what Sean Payton does. But let's go to our next stock up player here for the Broncos. And look, I think if people look at the box score, they're going to be like, oh, this isn't really a stock up guy. I think if you look at how he's played and you look at the circumstances Denver's been, Javonte Williams is a player I think Broncos country should talk about a little bit more on stock up here. Now, obviously, he ran his tail off on Sunday. He had a 17-yard catch and run in the passing game, ran through people. He had some angry run candidacies there. But I don't think people realize Denver being in the deficit that they were in this game, and especially as how they got to 2 to 3 scores really quickly, Denver had to abandon the run game because of that. I mean, he finished the game with 11 carries for 42 yards here. We have yet, like, Denver's run game has been a strength for them, but their defense has allowed opponents to score. They've allowed teams to get up on them to the point in the last couple of weeks here. They simply just can't keep running the football. That, to me, I think is disappointing.
It is, Cody, and I think it definitely bodes well for them over the course of the long haul of the season that they have running backs that are running well when they're given opportunities. It's not like, early on in this game, the running game was struggling so badly. So the Broncos had to throw, and that allowed the Dolphins to get key stops on third. It wasn't like that. And it hasn't really been like that. We just haven't seen a consistent ability to emphasize or commit to the run fully. I can't wait for the day when we're able to see this team rush 30 times in a game, because look, that's what they're going to have to do in order to have sustained long-term offensive success. You can't go out there and throw the ball 40, 45 times a game with Russell Wilson every single week. That's just not how this team is built to win, especially when you talk about how the offense and defense complement each other. We'll know the defense is playing much better, Cody, when the Broncos are getting up there in rushing attempts, when they're able to play more ball control, because, hey, the defense is getting them the ball back, getting them more possessions, giving the offense an opportunity to actually control the clock instead of having to just climb their way back in. It was 14-0 on Sunday, quicker than anybody hoped for or even probably realized. I mean, it was 14-0 within the first handful of minutes of the game. The Broncos just can't. That's just not how this team is built. We said it all offseason. They want to be physical and run the ball. Can't do that when your defense has given up so many points. So I agree. Javonte Williams, stock up after Sunday.
On a guy who's an easy punching bag for everybody, but has actually, I think, played pretty well here. Obviously, he's had a couple of moments this season. I think Russell Wilson deserves to be mentioned here in our stock up. Obviously, for him, 308 yards on the afternoon against the Miami Dolphins. Get this. He was sacked one total time in Sunday's game, but he was hit, Sayre. He was hit 12 times. I mean, what I saw from him and why he's on my stock up is he wasn't the reason that the Broncos lost this game. He was the reason that they were actually mildly competitive at first when Miami went up 14-0. He marched Denver right down the field there, made some amazing throws while standing in the pocket, getting blasted. That gave Denver a chance to cut it from 14-0 to 14-7 here. I think we've seen, good progress from Russell Wilson. We've seen Denver's offense be better with Russ this year, but it doesn't matter if the defense is giving up the points that they are there. So I had to mention Russell Wilson here as an honorary stock up here. You have to look at it. And ironically enough, all of our stock up players are on offense. I don't think there's a single defensive player that is going to get a stock up mention here on this week's episode of Locked On Broncos. But that's going to take us to our stock down, where there will be plenty of conversations about the Broncos defense and other aspects of this team in Broncos country. You're going to get that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Nutrafol. And did you know that 80% of men will experience hair thinning in their lifetime? It's normal, but it doesn't have to be your fate. You can get ahead of thinning with Nutrafol here today. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Go to Nutrafol.com/med to take their hair health wellness quiz, identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. NFL.
We want to put the entire defense for the Denver Broncos on blast for Stock Down, our segment today. No, Cody, in all seriousness, we've got to talk about some of the specific areas of this Denver Broncos defense that really led to a historic loss on Sunday against the Miami Dolphins. But before we do that, before we get into our Stock Down, our defensive segment of today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, just want to give a huge shout out to every single one of you that makes Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, free and available anywhere that you can find podcasts, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, as well as on YouTube, Cody, where a lot of people are sounding off after that Dolphins game. And we asked for it right in the days leading up to the game, where said, hey, jump in the YouTube comment section. So people took us up on that offer. So once again, we thank you so much for being part of the show, however you choose to do so, especially for you everydayers out there who grinded out the offseason with us, who grind out every loss at this point, and hopefully soon we'll be able to celebrate some wins together. But thanks for making us part of your day, and let us know your stock up if you have any, and stock down, certainly you have some. Drop it in the comments section and let us know what you think. But Cody, we got to start obviously defensively. This is the stock down. I just break down the numbers for us here. Tell us why the whole defense is stock down after Sunday's loss.
I mean, these are numbers that kind of get tattooed in your brain after a whopping that we saw. I mean, Denver losing by 50 points, right? 70-20, right? We haven't seen this in the modern era of the NFL ever. It's unbelievable, the fact that, and the way that today's NFL game is played. I mean, that Dolphins offense, and I think we can be very honest here, Sayre, they pulled their starters, I think, with 8-9 minutes left in that fourth quarter. If Miami really wanted to, they probably could have gotten to 80 points. They probably could have gotten maybe to 86, 87 points there. I mean, Denver simply had no answer. They were getting gashed through the air by Tua Tagovailoa. They were getting gashed on the ground by Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, and even the third string running back, Brooks, that had some massive runs there. So for me, okay, the numbers are tattooed in my brain right now. I think we'll remember for quite some time, not only 70 points, we're also going to talk about 726 total yards allowed by Denver defensively. They averaged 10.2 yards per play. The Miami Dolphins offense did, but this is the most staggering number. Outside of the 70 points, you look at it, 10 touchdowns that attributed to 70 total points in this outcome for Denver. I mean, 10 touchdowns. Sayre, that is what you do when you're playing on maybe pro mode or rookie mode on Madden. It is unbelievable that this was the production here. And look, what attributed to these 726 yards allowed? I think bad tackling, bad coverage, bad scheme, and simply just no adjustment here. And players in the locker room, especially Broncos defensive players, said they've never been part of something like this before, and that they think it's going to be very evident when they go back and they watch the film to see what happened. But it just seemed like a lot of those guys hung their heads there because Miami just, I'd say, imposed their will, but they also took Denver's will from them. To me, that is an issue here. And I don't know, how do you bounce back from that? Look, I've been part of some losses before. When in high school, we've lost 50 points before, but nothing was as bad as this, right? We never allowed 70 points. And this is professional. This is the best of the best in the world, Sayre. And this is just demoralizing, and it caused embarrassment. You had former Broncos players, Bradley Roby, former Bronco, who also played under Vance Joseph, said that this was embarrassing, which I think that maybe kind of closes out on any potential reunion for him and the Broncos going forward. But I mean, players aren't wrong. This was embarrassing, and it really was the defense. I don't think there was a single player on defense that we can say, hey, this guy's stock was up. I think everybody's stock on the defensive side of the ball is down from this game specifically.
I think so too, Cody, and I hope these guys take it personally. That's kind of what I'm hoping. You asked how do you bounce back from it? I hope they take it personally, and I hope they dramatically change things around. I mean, to see last season the worst offense in Broncos history, and then follow that up this year with what I believe to be this is the worst defense I've ever seen. I remember the 2010 team. When Josh McDaniels got fired that year, yes, people pointed that out to me on Twitter. I remember the 2008 team, Jay Cutler's second year as the full-time starter when he made the Pro Bowl. I remember all this stuff, and I remember you can go all the way back. I mean, however far you want to go back. I've not seen a worse defense than this. Maybe Super Bowl 50, but even then, that wasn't all the defense, right? The Seahawks defense was scoring. Their special teams was scoring. I can't recall ever seeing a worse defense than this as a Broncos fan or somebody covering the team. It's just, like you said, embarrassing. And I hope those guys take it personal. I hope they listen to all the noise and hear what people are saying, because look, you're not just part of the 2023 Denver Broncos. You are part of a legacy for this team. You're part of one of the most storied and proud franchises in NFL history, an ownership group that just paid billions of dollars to acquire the team. And you're going out there and that's the effort that you're putting forth. Like it's pathetic. It's disgusting to have to own that as somebody who puts Broncos paraphernalia behind me every single day. Like, I'm embarrassed to be a Broncos fan after that. And so for the guys playing, if you come out and you're just like, man, yeah, we'll be better this no, don't give us that bull crap. Take it personally and don't come out with this, it's just one game, this, that. No, you got to take this personally. We, as the fans of the team, have to go out every single day to other people in our lives who know that we are Broncos fans, and they're acting like somebody that we know just died, or it's like they're acting like they feel sorry for us, and that like reignites the embarrassment and the rage that we experience watching this trash on the field. So I hope, Cody, that these guys on the defense, these players who are paid so much money, take it personally that they just embarrass an entire fan base, and relatively permanently so. I mean, you're not coming back from this one anytime soon.
No, unless, there's some team out there next week that gives up 73 points. Then I think,
Right.
it saves you some grace there. This is like Dan Orlovsky stepping out of the back of the end zone, right? And it's like, hey, This hasn't happened for years. Jimmy G does it. Gardner Minshew does it over the weekend. Everybody still remembers the time that you stepped out of the back of the end zone. It doesn't matter if two guys did it recently. It's still going to be there. It's going to be a mark here for this team. But, and Sayre, and I think we got to talk about another guy here in terms of stock down. Got to look at Vance Joseph. He's the guy who's calling the defense. He's responsible. This hasn't happened in the modern era of the NFL. And there were times where the camera panned to him and it looked like he literally had no idea what to do. It looked like he was just shocked. And I think everybody was shocked, to be honest with you. But you have to have some sort of response here. For Denver to give up 35 points last week after having a 21-3 lead, and then this week giving up 70 points and seemingly not be able to find a solution there, that is also a coaching issue. As much as it is on the players, it's also mutually exclusive to being on the coaches as well. They share that type of blame. Position coaches, defensive coordinator, players on the field. That blame is mutually exclusive here, and they're going to have to find a way to bounce back. And obviously, as the time that we're sitting down recording this episode of the show on Monday morning, we have no idea if Sean Payton plans to make a change. Obviously, if that is the case, and this comes out a little bit later, if he does, then obviously you'll have some clarity there. But Vance Joseph, stock down here for the Denver Broncos as they proceed forward here into week 4 against the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields and what many people are calling the Caleb Williams Bowl here in week 4 of the NFL season. How wild is that there? Broncos Country, we've covered every step of the way here. But we're also going to talk about something else on today's episode of the show. Has Sean Payton's comments from the offseason come back to bite the team in the rear end? We'll dive deep into that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, they get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or whether you lose when you put down $5 here today. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. Their app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. With the Broncos set to have a showdown this upcoming weekend against the Chicago Bears, let's take a look at the lines there. The Broncos are 3-point favorites heading into this matchup, but the over-under is listed at 45.5 in the Caleb Williams Sweepstakes Bowl that you're going to get at Soldier Field here. Where do you think that this game may go here? Well, FanDuel is the place to get in on all the action. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. You can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for rocking with us through these tough times that are going on in Broncos Country. 7 years of tough times. And look, still 14 games left in the season. It doesn't seem very likely that the optics will change, but it is still possible. But, we appreciate you rocking with us every step of the way here on the show here. Sayre, I wanted to dive deep into this because I feel like this is maybe an important conversation to have here, because obviously after an embarrassing 70-20 loss that the Broncos suffered on Sunday, a lot of things are coming full circle here for Sean Payton. And I think it goes back to the offseason when he was first introduced as the team's head coach. What was one of the first things that he said about this team, Sayre? He said something along the lines of, we're not going to be so vocal. We're not going to be as much in your face. We're going to be anonymous donors in a sense where, hey, we're not broadcasting what we're doing. We're not putting it out there. But that kind of came back to bite him in the offseason because he did the USA Today interview that obviously talked about last year's coaching job with Nathaniel Hackett, and it was the worst coaching job in the NFL. You have this type of performance. It just seems like that's that karmic circle that's coming around right here for Denver. Do you feel like his comments have come back to haunt him a little bit here?
Yeah, I think definitely he's getting a slice of humble pie. I think both things can be true, right? Like he's been humbled by what happened and by what he said, but also I still think what he said was true. Like we can't just
Yes,
throw away
100%.
last year, right? I think a lot of people want to just say, "Well, hey, look at you, Sean Payton." Last year was well, we covered it on the show 5 days a week, every single week for the entire season. So we remember very clearly how bad it was all throughout the year. But for Sean Payton now, he definitely is getting a slice of humble pie with this particular loss. I mean, starting off 0-3, I think Cody would have been bad enough. But to have this, trajectory of, hey, you gave up, you lost by 1, gave up 17 in week 1, then you lose by 2, you give up 35 in week 2. Now you give up 70 points and lose by 50 in week 3. Just like, it's like if it's like Colorado going to Oregon, right? Or playing against Oregon over the weekend, right? So, I think, hey, this is big time for Sean Payton to have a slice of humble pie like this. Like this is worse than, gosh, like I would like to say this is worse than him being fined or maybe even suspended by the NFL like he's been in the past. Or this is something that you got to show up to work the next day. You've got to show up in front of your peers, like I was talking about. It's definitely a slice of humble pie for Sean Payton, but I still don't think that what he said, I don't think there was anything untrue about it. I just think right now you're kind of getting a taste, like you said, that karma's come full circle. You're getting a taste of your own medicine, and now like Nathaniel Hackett can sit from his seat and say like, "Hey, how about you now, man? How does that feel?" Like I think he has every right to do that. Whereas, even though last year was bad, like this is like we talked about in the post game, most embarrassing, maybe the worst loss in Denver Broncos history.
I mean, it is there. And look, everything that Peyton said about Hackett is spot on. It's accurate here. And things right now are, if you look at New York Jets Twitter, they're freaking out about Hackett being the play caller right now as well. But, aside from all of that stuff here, it's bulletin board material, right? We always talk about it, like in the coaching realm. I know one thing I'd always tell my kids is, hey, don't stay off social media. Don't post anything for anybody to use as ammunition or fuel against you. And that's what Sean Payton told his team. But Sean Payton went out there and he did the exact thing he told his players not to do, which, I mean, at some point does seem hypocritical. But here's the thing I do know about Sean Payton. He's ultra competitive. He does have a clear vision for what he wants from this football team, and it hasn't reached where it's at yet. And look, I think he's done a tremendous job with the offense in comparison to where we thought maybe they could or would be here. But at the same time, he also did hire Vance Joseph back into the building here. And look, I get it. And I think we have to be very clear because I see a lot of misconceptions out there. There's some fans that still believe that he fired Ejiro Evero and that he didn't want to bring Evero back, as we all know. And he's been very open about this. Sean Payton made it no secret that he wanted Vic Fangio to be his defensive coordinator wherever he ended up, even before he was hired with the Denver Broncos. Vic obviously did not want to come back to Denver, took the job in Miami, looking like a great move for him right now so far. Would have been a good move for Denver, I think, if he would have went to Denver. But he tried to keep Ejiro Evero. But how things went with Nathaniel Hackett in Denver last season, that's Ejiro Evero did not want to return here. He did not. So he went to Carolina. And then obviously Denver settled on Vance Joseph here. And look, it's rough, man. It is a rough turn of events from what we have seen from this team in the last 2 weeks. And right now, I think if you ask any Broncos fan, I've had a lot of fans in my mentions. I've had some fans email me directly and say that they don't think they are going to attend another game this season in Denver. So to me, I'm going to be very curious to see what the ripple effect of this is. But here's one thing I do know. Sayre, Sean Payton, this Broncos team is in a really, really big hole right now. And he's going to have to do a lot of work. This team in general is going to have to do a lot of work to claw themselves out of this, what seems like bottomless pit of despair that I just don't know if you can get out of here. This is the type of loss, and based on how Denver responds this week, Sunday's loss to the Dolphins, I think, will define the rest of the season. You're going to see exactly what mentality this team does have, and then we're going to see that carry over here into week 4. Is Denver going to bounce back, or are they going to let week 3's devastating, historically embarrassing loss set the tone for the rest of the season? To me, I think that's what I want to see, where this football team is at, and maybe how Sean Payton leads from that standpoint.
Right. And just like you and I talk about with, you know, how quarterbacks, like starting quarterbacks, will get judged in the preseason. Like if they play well, oh, it was just preseason. Or if they play poorly, it's like, wow, you couldn't even play well. There's no winning it with starting quarterbacks playing in the preseason. Essentially, kind of feels like we're headed towards that against the Chicago Bears, doesn't it? Who are equally as hapless right now as the Denver Broncos. They look as lost out there, and maybe worse on both sides of the ball, unfortunately for them. So going into Chicago on week 4 and getting a win, it's going to kind of feel like getting a bronze medal or something for Broncos fans. So it's going to take time, I think, for this to heal. But certainly you don't want to go into Chicago and even struggle to a victory this week. I think the Broncos have to come in and kind of make a statement, which it sounds pretty lofty to even think that they could do that based on what we have seen, especially recently. But for this team, in order to inspire any sort of confidence from the fan base, I think you have to go into Chicago and kick their butts. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen. I'm just saying that's what I think needs to happen in order for the fans to be any sort of like, okay, I'm seeing that vision unfold, or I'm buying into what you've been saying now just a little bit. I know it was the Chicago Bears, but we got a chance to come home against the New York Jets then without Aaron Rodgers. And so it starts with winning big in Chicago. And I just don't know, Cody, if the Broncos can do that.
It's going to be tough here, but according to our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Broncos are 3.5-point road favorites. Even after a 70-point shellacking on the road, they're 3.5-point favorites. And also the over-under for that game is set at 45.5. And if we've looked at how bad, obviously Chicago's offense has been awful. Their defense has been giving up a lot of points. Denver's defense has been giving up a lot of points. This also has the makings for, what type of narrative are we going to get from this game, especially if Justin Fields, who's been awful so far, if he somehow goes off against Denver's defense. I think some people are going to try to use that to slight Patrick Surtain. Look, Surtain was the right pick 10 times out of 10. You can't convince me otherwise here. But I don't think Justin Fields would have a lot of success here in Denver either. He's not processing things a certain way. So this is certainly a very big game for 2-0-3 teams on the season. As we had talked about here, this is the Caleb Williams Bowl, according to so many people on social media. You know what? We're going to ride with it the entire week here. But Broncos Country, thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Share us your thoughts. Share us who your stock up players are, stock down is, all together in the YouTube comments if you're watching there, where you can always interact with us on social media at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. We'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show as we take a little bit of a deeper preview into Sunday's game against the Chicago Bears. What can the Broncos do to win that game? Well, you get that and much more on tomorrow's episode of the show.